You're a senator, a baker, a slave, a soldier. No, forget the sandals and togas for a moment. Instead, picture this. It's a typical afternoon in ancient Rome, and a low, humid groan rises from the city. It's not the murmur of the marketplace or the clang of a blacksmith. It's the collective sigh of a city in desperate need of a bath. Your tunic is sticking to your back, the dust of the unpaved streets is clinging to your skin, and the general funk of Roman life is palpable. And you just know that the best place to be right now isn't some marble villa, but a place filled with thousands of strangers, all sweating and sloshing together. Because ancient Roman public baths were wilder than you think. Forget what Hollywood shows you, those sanitized, dimly lit pools where a couple of perfectly sculpted actors exchange conspiratorial whispers. The reality was a chaotic, multi-sensory explosion. You're not just stepping into a bathhouse. You're stepping into the beating, grimy heart of Roman society, where everything you thought you knew about cleanliness class and public life is about to be turned on its head. This isn't just about scrubbing away the dirt. It's about scrubbing away the social norms of the modern world. It's a place of noise, of sweat, of strange smells, and stranger rituals. So take a deep breath, hold your nose if you must, and let's go inside. The first thing that hits you is the sheer scale. Forget your local gym steam room. These were architectural behemoths, sprawling complexes the size of city blocks. The grandest of them, like the baths of Caracalla, could hold thousands of people at once. As you approach, you see the magnificent facade, a monument of arches and columns. But the true spectacle is the crowd spilling out onto the street, a swirling, shouting throng of people from all walks of life. Senators in their pure white togas jostle against grimy laborers in simple tunics. Women carrying baskets of towels haggle with street vendors selling oily sausages. It's an urban microcosm, a human tide, pulling you toward the entrance. You pay your admission. It's a ridiculously small fee, the equivalent of a couple of pennies today. The affordability was a deliberate choice by the emperors. The baths were a public good, a way to keep the masses happy, healthy, and perhaps most importantly, distracted from political unrest. This was Rome's version of bread and circuses, a cheap escape from the daily grind. You hand over your coin and you're in. The noise level jumps tenfold. The air is thick with the scent of damp stone human bodies and a dozen different types of perfumed oils. It's a sensory overload. You can hear the slap of bare feet on marble, the muffled echoes of laughter, the shouts of attendants, and the distinct, high-pitched thwack of a masseur's open palm on someone's back. Your first stop is the apoditarium, the changing room. It's less a tranquil locker room and more a frantic open-air bazaar. There are no individual lockers here, no private cubicles. Instead, you're faced with a series of small, open-fronted niches in the wall. You quickly shed your clothes, folding your tunic and placing it in one of these cubbies. As you do, you can't help but notice the sheer lack of privacy. You're surrounded by other naked bodies, all shapes and sizes, all in various states of undress. This is where you encounter a particularly fascinating quirk of Roman bath culture, the capsarius. This was a slave whose sole job was to guard your clothes. You might think, well, that's nice. But the truth is, they were notoriously unreliable. Historians still argue whether they were more of a deterrent or just an expensive formality, as theft was rampant in the apoditarium. You hand your clothes to a capsarius, a bored-looking boy, who looks like he's seen it all before, and try to suppress the thought that you might be walking out of here in nothing but a towel. You're now fully exposed just like everyone else. The lack of clothing was the great equalizer here. A man's status on the outside meant very little inside. You'd see a wealthy senator chatting with a former slave as if they were old friends. The baths were a social melting pot, a place where the strict hierarchies of Roman life dissolved at least for a few hours. This leads to a rather quirky tidbit: to avoid the shame of public nakedness. Some Romans, especially those of a more modest or sensitive disposition, would wear a small loincloth, a subligaculum. It was considered a bit prissy, but it was an option for the faint of heart. You, however, are going full Roman. The journey continues into the palaestra, a vast open-air courtyard surrounded by columns. This is the gym. And it's not just a place for a light jog. Here men are wrestling in pools of olive oil, slick and gleaming under the sun. Others are lifting heavy stones, playing an early version of handball, or practicing with wooden swords. The air is filled with the grunts of exertion and the rhythmic chant of trainers. It's a symphony of physical effort, and the heat from the day's sun is being amplified by the sheer number of bodies. But it's not all intense training. You also see groups of men just standing around, catching up on the latest gossip or discussing a business deal. The palaestra was a place for both physical exertion and social congregation, a truly unique blend of a modern gym and a coffee shop. You watch a few of the men, wrestle their muscles straining, and you feel the urge to join in, to be part of this vibrant, sweaty, and very public ritual. But for now, the allure of the water is too strong. The promise of relief of a cleansing plunge is what you came for. As you leave the palaestra, you find yourself navigating a labyrinth of corridors and smaller rooms, all leading deeper into the complex. The soundscape changes. The open-air shouts of the athletes fade, replaced by the hushed echoes of enclosed spaces. You're now in a more intimate, and in some ways more unsettling part of the baths. The air, already thick, becomes even heavier, saturated with a cocktail of smells, some earthy and metallic, others sharp and acrid. This is the squalor behind the splendor. For all the marble and grand design, the logistics of keeping thousands of people clean in a world without modern plumbing were challenging. You pass by a small room where an attendant is diligently scrubbing the floor, not with a mop, but with a bristle broom and a bucket of water that looks suspiciously murky. The water system itself was a marvel of engineering, a series of lead pipes bringing fresh water in, and a network of drains carrying the waste away. But the Romans didn't have a true understanding of germs. The water that flowed through these pipes wasn't always sparkling clean, and the drains were, to put it mildly, often backed up. You step carefully, avoiding a puddle of something you'd rather not identify, a grim reminder that the opulence of the baths was built on a foundation of less than hygienic realities. This is a good time to remember the very real, very gross facts of Roman life. We often romanticize the grandeur, but we forget the gritty details. One of the most common products used for cleaning was a mixture of oil and strigil scraping, which we'll get to later. But the Romans also used, and this might make you a little queasy, urine. Specifically fermented urine, which contains ammonia. It was a potent cleaning agent used for everything from fulling cloth to, yes, supposedly scrubbing down floors and walls. While historians still debate how widespread this practice was inside the public baths themselves, the simple fact that it was a common part of the Roman cleaning arsenal tells you everything you need to know about their approach to sanitation. The smell of it, a sharp, pungent odor sometimes mixed with the sweet scent of perfumes, is a constant backdrop to your journey. You also notice the latrines. Not some hidden room tucked away, but a communal space, a series of stone benches with holes cut in them. There are no dividers, no doors. Men sit shoulder to shoulder, their conversation, flowing as freely as the water in the channel beneath their feet. It's a very public, very social experience, a testament to the Roman lack of personal boundaries. It's here that you might see a high-ranking official discussing the latest political scandal with a merchant, both of them attending to their business with a casualness that's alien to our modern sensibilities. It's a bizarre, almost theatrical display of human functions and social interaction. A truly unique blend of business and, well, bathroom business. You pass by a small, unremarkable room, a side chapel, to the main bath areas. This is the place where a quirky fringe tidbit of Roman life comes to light. It's a sort of lost and found, but for a more unusual kind of object teeth. Yes, teeth. In Roman society, tooth decay was rampant, and dentistry was primitive at best. So people would often have to get their teeth pulled. And while we're not sure why, a curious number of these teeth have been found in and around the baths. Perhaps it was a place of last resort, a place to find a quack dentist, or maybe it was just a strange superstition. It's a bizarre, unsettling detail that reminds you just how much of ancient life we still don't fully understand. The more you walk, the more you realize that the baths were not just about cleaning the body, but about the body in a much broader, more public way. Every aspect of personal hygiene, from going to the bathroom to getting your teeth pulled, was a public affair, a shared experience. The idea of a private, solitary space for such activities was a foreign concept. The Roman mindset was one of collective life. You ate in public, you conducted business in public, and you got clean in public. The baths were the grandest and most spectacular embodiment of this philosophy. But let's be honest, all this talk of urine and teeth and dubious water quality is making you just a little bit anxious to get to the main event. You can hear the sounds of splashing water now, the excited chatter of people finally getting to the warm, inviting pools. The promise of the grand bathing halls with their high ceilings and beautiful statues is pulling you forward. You just have to get past the last of the grimy corridors, the last of the strange smells, and the last of the social oddities. Just a little further. The promise of relief is almost there, a beacon of clean water in a world of dust and questionable sanitation. You can almost feel the warmth on your skin. You finally made it. The passage through the squalor is complete, and you emerge into a grand open hall. The light, which was dim in the corridors, now streams in from high windows, illuminating the steam that hangs in the air like a thick, pearlescent fog. The acoustics are different here. The frantic chatter of the apoditarium and the grunts of the palaestra are replaced by a constant low roar, 1,000 conversations, blending into a single, overwhelming sound. This is the heart of the baths, and it's immediately clear that it is so much more than a place to get clean. The baths were the ultimate Roman social hub. Think of them as a modern community center, a business lounge, a town square, and a spa all rolled into one. You see groups of men huddled together, their faces serious, whispering about grain prices or the latest senatorial scandal. A philosopher recognized by his distinctive beard and simple tunic holds court in a corner surrounded by a small crowd of eager students hanging on his every word. A poet recites his latest work, his voice, a soaring counterpoint to the general hum. This was where the real business of Rome was conducted. Deals were struck, reputations were made and broken, and alliances were forged, all while everyone was in various states of undress. The casual mixing of classes is on full display. A wealthy merchant from a far-flung province is sharing a joke with a slave. A soldier on leave is bragging about his latest campaign to a group of retirees. The public nature of the baths meant that people you would never see together in any other setting were suddenly on equal footing. This was a radical concept for a society as obsessed with hierarchy as Rome's. The common denominator was the desire for relaxation and social connection. The water was the great equalizer, washing away the barriers of rank and status, at least for a little while. And it wasn't just about business and politics. The baths were a place for pure, unadulterated leisure. Gambling was a common pastime. You see men huddled around makeshift boards, tossing dice, the occasional shout of triumph or groaning curse cutting through the air. Vendors, both official and unofficial, weaved through the crowds, selling everything from sweet cakes to tiny vials of perfumed oil. It's a festival-like atmosphere, a celebration of life and community. It was a place for a Roman to truly let their guard down, to shed not only their clothes but their public persona, a mainstream historical fact. The baths were so central to Roman life that they were often built and funded by emperors or wealthy citizens as a way to curry favor with the public. They weren't just a convenience, they were a political statement. The larger and more luxurious the baths, the more generous and powerful the patron was perceived to be. This led to an architectural arms race of sorts, with each new emperor trying to outdo the last. This is why you see such incredible art and engineering in these complexes. They were designed to awe and inspire. A particularly quirky or fringe tidbit. It was not uncommon for Romans to use the baths as a kind of impromptu library. They would carry small wax tablets and styluses to jot down notes from a conversation or a snippet of poetry they overheard. It was a place for mental stimulation as much as physical relaxation. Imagine trying to take notes in a hot, steamy room filled with naked people. It's a testament to their dedication. It was a strange blend of quiet scholarship and public noise. Historians still argue whether the mixing of social classes in the baths was a genuine reflection of social fluidity, or if it was merely a temporary, superficial facade. Did the senator truly see the slave as an equal in that moment, or was it just a game they played? The truth is likely somewhere in the middle. The baths offered a unique space for interaction, but the hierarchies of Roman society didn't simply evaporate with a good scrubbing. The power dynamics were still there, just softened by the steam and the communal atmosphere. You can feel the difference now. The initial anxiety and apprehension have faded, replaced by a sense of belonging, a feeling of being part of this vast, interconnected social organism. The baths are a living, breathing thing, a place of constant movement and interaction. You've shed your clothes and your social guard, and you're ready to dive into the next stage of the experience. The water awaits, but first there's another unspoken rule you need to navigate. The delicate art of who can be seen in the buff with whom. The heat and steam have a way of blurring the lines, but even in this communal, nearly naked utopia, there were rules. Unwritten ones, mostly about who you were expected to see and be seen with. The idea of public nudity was an essential part of the bath experience, but it wasn't without its social complications. You're now a body in a sea of bodies, and while this might feel liberating, you quickly notice the subtle social choreography at play. Take, for instance, the sheer audacity of being a woman in the baths. While men and women often bathed in separate sections or at different times of day, this wasn't always the case. In some of the smaller or less reputable bathhouses, they might share the same space. And while some people might find this scandalous, it was a practical reality. For a mainstream historical fact, Emperor Hadrian actually tried to enforce gender separation in the baths, but his edict was often ignored. He saw it as a matter of public morality, but for the average Roman it was just a matter of convenience. This created a tension between official decrees and social practice. You're now navigating this dynamic, aware of your own nakedness and the nakedness of those around you. The bodies you see are not the idealized, marble-smooth figures from Roman statues. They are real bodies with scars, with bellies, with wrinkles, and with the wear and tear of a hard life. It's a truly democratic display of humanity in all its flawed glory. And yet there's a subtle hierarchy at play. The wealthy might have their own private rooms for a fee, a way to have the bath experience without the indignity of rubbing shoulders with the common folk. But the main halls, the ones you're in now, are for everyone. A quirky or fringe tidbit. Some of the more flamboyant members of the elite would use the baths not just for hygiene, but as a kind of fashion statement. They would have their servants carry elaborate bronze or silver strigils, the scrapers we'll get to later, that were ornately decorated. And it was a way of saying, yes, I'm just like you, getting clean with everyone else, but my scraper is better than your scraper. It was a strange blend of humility and ostentatious display, a truly Roman way of handling things. And let's not forget the children. The baths were a family affair, a place where fathers would bring their sons to teach them about hygiene and social life. You might see a small boy giggling as he tries to splash his father, who's in a serious conversation with a friend. The baths were a place for a Roman to be a parent, a friend, a citizen, and a physical body all at once. It's here that you might be confronted with a more complex issue. Historians still argue whether the presence of women and men in the same bathing areas, even if separate pools led to genuine social mixing, or was simply a space for licentious behavior. Did it break down barriers, or did it just provide a convenient place for flirtation and, for lack of a better word, debauchery? The answer, as with most things in history, is likely both. The Roman baths were a mirror of Roman society itself, a place of grandeur and grime, of lofty ideas and base desires. As you move through the warm, steamy halls, you become more comfortable with your own nakedness. You're no longer just a person. You're a body in a crowd of bodies. And while you still feel the lingering awkwardness, you start to understand the Roman perspective. This was not a place of shame or embarrassment. It was a place of acceptance, of shared experience. You are all Romans, all in need of a good scrub. You are all equal in your vulnerability and in your humanity. The next stage of the journey awaits. You've shed your clothes and your social guard. You've witnessed the social fabric of Rome unravel and reform. Now it's time to get down to the dirty business of getting clean. You can see attendants moving through the crowd, carrying strange tools, and you realize that the process of getting a Roman bath was a far cry from the simple soap and water we're used to. It's time to get greasy. You've navigated the social complexities and are now ready for the main event, the actual cleaning. But forget soap. It wasn't a common item for personal hygiene in ancient Rome. Instead, they had a method that might make your skin crawl, but was for them a perfectly logical and effective way to get clean. The air is thick with the scent of olive oil and something vaguely herbal, a mixture that is about to become very familiar. An attendant approaches you, a small, bored-looking man with a large jar of oil and a few strange tools in his hand. You are ushered to a bench and told to sit. He begins by pouring a generous amount of olive oil all over your body. It feels cool at first, then slick and a little bit greasy. The oil is a crucial part of the process. It's a solvent, a way to trap the dirt, sweat, and general grime that has accumulated on your skin. As he works, you see him adding in a variety of powders and perfumed herbs. A mainstream historical fact, these concoctions were a personal choice, and the wealthy would often have their own unique blends with exotic ingredients imported from across the empire. The more elaborate the oil, the higher your social standing. Once you are thoroughly oiled and powdered, the attendant hands you one of the most iconic and frankly weirdest tools of the Roman bath, the strigil. It's a small, curved metal scraper, usually made of bronze iron or sometimes even silver. This is where the real work begins. The attendant starts to scrape the oil and dirt mixture off your body, a long, firm stroke, from shoulder to wrist, from thigh to ankle. The feeling is strange. It's not unpleasant, but it's certainly not a gentle loofah. You can see the grime coming off a gray, oily paste that is then wiped away. That's an oddly satisfying process, watching the dirt literally being scraped from your skin. This is a very quirky or fringe tidbit. The strigil was so common that it was often used as a kind of a status symbol. Wealthy Romans would have their strigils finely decorated with intricate designs and even jewels. And remember the earlier mention of the thieves in the changing rooms? The strigil was a prime target. Historians still argue whether the strigil was a truly effective cleaning tool or if it was more of a social ritual. Did it genuinely get them clean, or was it just a deeply ingrained part of their culture, a tradition that they clung to regardless of its efficacy? The truth is, it worked, but perhaps not as well as a modern soap. It was more about a ritual of renewal than a scientific approach to hygiene. The attendant continues the scraping process, moving from your limbs to your torso. You feel the tension in your muscles begin to release, and you realize this isn't just about getting clean. It's also a form of intense massage. The firm pressure, the scraping motion, the heat of the room, it all works together to create a feeling of total relaxation. It's a full-body experience, a kind of Roman spa day. But it wasn't just about the scraping. After the strigil, you might be treated to a full-body shave or a haircut. The Roman baths were a one-stop shop for personal care. You could get your nails trimmed, your hair styled, and your body massaged, all without ever leaving the complex. It was a place where a Roman could truly reset both physically and mentally. And while the strigil was the most common method of cleaning, it wasn't the only one. Some Romans, especially those with more sensitive skin, would use pumice stones or even a kind of early scrub made from ground pumice and herbal powders. But the strigil was king, the symbol of the Roman bath experience. You feel the last of the oil and dirt being scraped away, and you feel new, lighter. A little bit raw, but definitely cleaner. The attendant gives you a final wipe down with a clean towel, and you are ready for the next stage of your journey. You are no longer covered in the grime of the city, but you are still covered in the sweet, pungent scent of olive oil and herbs, and that in and of itself is a whole other story. You've been scraped, oiled, and now you're a walking, talking, and slightly aromatic testament to Roman hygiene. The lingering scent of the olive oil and herbs is surprisingly pleasant, a sweet and earthy aroma that is a far cry from the more pungent smells you've encountered. But this is just a single note in the complex symphony of smells that permeated the baths. The air even now is a rich tapestry of scents, some lovely, some less so. The perfumed oils you were anointed with were just the tip of the iceberg. As you move toward the pools, you notice vendors selling all manner of unguents and fragrances. These were not just for the body. They were for the hair, for the clothing, and for the very air itself. The Romans were obsessed with scent, a mainstream historical fact. They used a wide variety of perfumes made from flowers like roses and lilies and spices like cinnamon and myrrh. The scent of a person was an important part of their social identity, a way to show their wealth and sophistication. But then there are the other smells. the ones that no amount of perfume could truly mask. The scent of sweat, of course, is everywhere, a constant humid presence. The smell of the crowded latrines, even with their flowing water, is a subtle but persistent undercurrent. And then there are the less identifiable smells: the tang of warm, wet stone, the metallic scent of the bronze and lead pipes, the faint, yeasty smell of wine from the small tavern in the corner of the palestra. It's a sensory experience that is as much about the unpleasant as it is about the sublime. This is where a quirky or fringe tidbit comes in. A curious smell that was often present in the Roman baths was that of crocodile dung. Yes, you heard that right. It was used of all things as a kind of sunscreen and facial exfoliant. While this was more common in the eastern parts of the empire, a few recipes have been found in the Roman texts. It was a fringe practice for sure, and we can only imagine the kind of bouquet it would have created. Historians still argue whether this was a truly widespread practice or if it was more of a bizarre, isolated trend. But the simple fact that it existed at all tells you everything you need to know about the Romans' experimental approach to cosmetics. The baths were a place of sensory overload, a place where the high and low, the beautiful and the foul existed side by side. You could be talking to a senator who smelled of rose petals, while a grimy gladiator a few feet away reeked of stale sweat and cheap wine. It was a microcosm of Roman life, a place where all the different facets of their world were on full aromatic display. The scents told a story of class, of profession, of personal choice, and of a world where what we consider a public nuisance was simply a part of the everyday. You're now moving toward the main pool, the caldarium, or hot room. The heat is intense, a thick, enveloping blanket of air that makes you feel a little dizzy. But the smell here is different. It's the scent of hot, clean water. It's a scent of relief, of a final release from the dirt and the smells of the outside world. And as you step into the pool, as the hot water envelops you, you realize that all of the odd smells and sights were just the journey to this moment of pure, unadulterated relaxation. You can feel the tension leaving your muscles. You can feel the last of the grime being washed away. You are finally, truly clean. The moment you've been waiting for has finally arrived. You're submerged in the hot water of the caldarium, a deep rectangular pool where the heat is a physical presence, a gentle weight on your shoulders. The sensation is one of profound relief. You feel the tension and dirt of the city, both literal and figurative, dissolving around you. But this is just one part of the Roman spa day. The baths were a multi-stage ritual, a full-body journey from cleansing to total relaxation. After your hot soak, you're ready for the next step. You emerge from the pool, dripping and glowing, and move toward the etiquette. This is a warm room, a transition space between the intense heat of the caldarium and the cold shock of the frigidarium. Here you'll find more attendants ready to offer a range of treatments that would make a modern spa jealous. This is where you might get a full-body massage. The masseurs, called ellipti, would use fragrant oils and techniques that were surprisingly sophisticated for their time. The kneading and pressure on your muscles feel incredible after the workout and the scraping. It's a moment of pure bliss, a gentle and calming end to the intense cleansing process. But the pampering didn't stop there. This is a mainstream historical fact. The Romans were meticulous about hair removal. Both men and women would get their body hair plucked or shaved. Men would often have their beards removed, and women would get their legs and arms smoothed. It was a sign of cleanliness and good grooming. The tools were simple: tweezers, razors. and a kind of depilatory cream made from a mixture of pitch resin and other substances. It was a painful but necessary part of their beauty regimen, and it all happened right here in the baths. And there's a truly quirky or fringe tidbit to this. Some of the most extreme bathers, those who truly wanted to commit to the experience, would have their eyebrows plucked to a single delicate line. It was a sign of high fashion and an attempt to emulate the look of the gods in Roman art. It was a meticulous, painful, and very public process. Historians still argue whether this was a truly widespread practice or if it was just a fad among the Roman elite. But the fact that it existed at all shows just how far they were willing to go in the pursuit of beauty. The tepidarium is also where you might get your hair styled, your nails trimmed, and your feet massaged. It was a complete makeover, a full-service salon where you could leave looking and feeling like a completely new person. You would enter the baths a dusty, grimy citizen and emerge a polished, perfumed Roman. It was a total transformation. You're now moving through the tepidarium, feeling the lingering heat from the caldarium and the gentle massage from the ellipti. You are clean relaxed and ready for the final step. But the journey isn't over yet. The baths have one final surprise in store for you, a shock to the system that is both invigorating and, to a modern mind, a little bit terrifying. The plunge into the cold water. The frigidarium awaits. After the gentle warmth of the tepidarium and the deep heat of the caldarium, the next part of your journey feels like a genuine act of courage. You're walking toward a new hall, but the air is different here. It's cold, sharp, and invigorating. The warmth from your body immediately begins to dissipate, and the goosebumps on your arms are a clear sign of what's to come. You are approaching the frigidarium, the cold room, and it's a stark contrast to everything you've just experienced. The frigidarium is a large open-air pool, its water a chilling blue, and its surface often still from the lack of bathers. It's here that the pampered, relaxed feeling of the last two rooms is abruptly replaced by a jolt of pure shock. The purpose of this cold plunge was twofold. A mainstream historical fact. It was believed to close the pores and tone the muscles after the intense heat, and it was also seen as a kind of physical and mental wake-up call. It was a jolt of reality after the dreamy warmth of the caldarium. It was a shocking but necessary part of the ritual, a way to prepare the body for the outside world. You see a few brave souls already in the pool, their skin turning a rosy red from the cold. A few are gasping, but most are simply trying to adjust to the temperature. You take a deep breath and step in a slow, deliberate movement that gives you time to feel the shock with every inch of your body. The cold water is a physical presence, a weight that envelops you and makes you gasp. Your muscles tighten and your senses go into overdrive. It's a bracing, exhilarating, and frankly, kind of miserable experience. But after a few moments, the initial shock fades and a feeling of immense relief and invigoration takes over. You feel fully awake, your mind clear, and your body tingling. The baths were a place for more than just relaxation and hygiene. They were also a place for athletic pursuits. Remember the palestra from the beginning. This is where a quirky or fringe tidbit comes into play. Some bath complexes had pools deep enough for diving, and there's historical evidence of diving contests being held. But even more bizarrely, some of the more daring patrons would engage in a kind of acrobatic water ballet. They would perform synchronized dives and spins, a kind of early and very public form of aquatic gymnastics. It was a way to show off physical prowess and entertain the crowd. The frigidarium, with its large open pools, was the perfect stage for such displays. But even without the showmanship, the cold plunge was an essential part of the experience. It was the final step, the last act of the bath ritual. It was the moment you transition from the soft, warm world of the caldarium to the hard, cold world of the city outside. Historians still argue whether the cold plunge was a genuine health practice, or if it was simply a cultural tradition, a ritual that had to be performed regardless of its actual benefits. The truth is, it was probably a mix of both. It felt good, and it was what everyone did. You're now out of the water, wrapped in a towel, your skin glowing from the cold. You feel utterly and completely clean, but also utterly and completely exhausted. The long journey through the baths from the palaestra to the apoditerium, from the caldarium to the frigidarium, has been a physical and social marathon. You are now a new person, at least for a little while. And as you head toward the exit, you can hear the sounds of the baths behind you, the shouts, the splashes, the laughter, a symphony of human life that has been going on for hundreds of years. The grand building, the people within it, the rituals you have just experienced, it all feels like a single, seamless, and completely wild moment in time. After the bracing shock of the frigidarium, you are now on the final leg of your journey, but you're not quite ready for the outside world yet. The Romans understood the need for a gradual return to reality, a gentle winding down. You've shed your clothes, and your social guard endured the sweat, the scraping, and the cold plunge. Now you get to experience the core architectural marvels of the Roman public baths, the very rooms that made it all possible. You start back in the etiquette, the warm room. It feels incredibly comforting after the cold water, a gentle reacclimation. The air is warm and moist, but not as intensely hot as the caldarium. The room itself is a work of art with intricate mosaics on the floor and beautiful frescoes on the walls. Here you simply relax. You lie on a stone bench or a raised platform and let the warmth soak into your bones. This is a crucial part of the process, a period of calm and stillness before you face the world again. A mainstream historical fact. The tepidarium was the central hub of the baths, connecting the hot and cold rooms and acting as the main passageway. Its moderate temperature allowed bathers to acclimate before moving to the hotter rooms, preventing a sudden shock to the system. From here, you can see into the caldarium, the hot room. The heat, which was so intense when you were in it, now shimmers in the air, a visible curtain of steam. The caldarium was a feat of engineering. The floors and walls were hollow, a double-layer system, and hot air was pumped through the space between them. This system, called the hypocaust, heated the room to a sauna-like temperature. The water in the caldarium's pool was heated by a large furnace, and the heat would rise from the floor, making the room an oven. It was an ingenious system, a truly Roman solution to the problem of heating large public spaces. The noise here is different, too. It's a low hum, the sound of water boiling, and steam rising, a constant white noise that adds to the dreamlike atmosphere. And then there's the frigidarium, the cold room. You've already experienced its shock, but now you can see it from a distance, a tranquil, cool oasis. The frigidarium was often the grandest room in the complex, with high ceilings and beautiful statues. Its cold water was a final, invigorating step in the bath ritual. The frigidarium was a visual and sensory break from the intense heat of the caldarium. It was a space designed for both physical and aesthetic pleasure, a beautiful contrast to the functional spaces of the baths. A truly quirky or fringe tidbit is the use of hanging floors in the hypocaust system. The floors were raised on small brick pillars, allowing the hot air to circulate freely beneath them. This meant that the floors were a consistently warm temperature, a kind of radiant heating system that would be a modern luxury. It was a remarkable innovation, a truly brilliant piece of engineering that made the whole experience possible. Historians still argue whether the Hippocaust system was invented by the Romans or if they borrowed it from other cultures. It's a testament to the fact that even the most well-documented aspects of Roman life can have a shadowy, undocumented past. You're now back in the tepidarium, the quiet hub of the complex, a perfect place to reflect on the full-body experience you've just had. You've moved through the different spaces, each with its own unique temperature and purpose, and you've come to understand that the Roman public bath was not just a place to get clean. It was a carefully choreographed ritual, a physical journey from the grime of the outside world to a state of total, blissful relaxation. It was a public and private experience, a place for solitude and for community. And it was all made possible by the unseen labor that kept this massive machine running day and night. You've seen the opulence, the rituals, and the engineering marvels of the Roman baths, but there is an essential unseen aspect of the whole operation. The baths were a grand stage, but every play needs a backstage crew, and this one was no different. You move through a less-traveled corridor, a service tunnel, that runs beneath the main halls, and you get a glimpse of the vital, often brutal labor that made all of this possible. This is where the world of the Roman bath, so grand and public, becomes a much more personal and painful story. The air here is heavy with smoke and the smell of sweat and coal. You are in the heart of the Hippocaust, the engine room of the baths. Here slaves, men, women, and even children toil in the intense, suffocating heat. Their job is to constantly feed the furnaces with wood to heat the water and the floors above. This is a mainstream historical fact. The Hippocaust system required a massive amount of fuel and an equally massive amount of human labor. It was a dangerous, back-breaking job, and the lifespan of a stoker was often short. The slaves who worked here were rarely seen by the bathers above. Their world was one of smoke, heat, and relentless, repetitive labor. They were the anonymous force that kept the water hot, the floors warm, and the whole system running smoothly. You can see the exhaustion on their faces, the soot on their skin, and the dull resignation in their eyes. This is the reality of the Roman dream, the unglamorous side of the greatest empire on earth. And then there's the other unseen labor, the slaves who served as the capsari, guarding the clothes in the changing rooms, the elliptae, who performed the massages and anointments, the countless others who cleaned the floors, scrubbed the walls, and carried fresh water. Their lives were dictated by the rhythms of the baths, their time not their own. They were an essential part of the social and physical machinery of the baths, and yet they were almost invisible. A quirky or fringe tidbit. The slaves who worked in the baths sometimes had a small chance at freedom. If they were particularly skilled, or if their master was feeling generous, they could be manumitted and become freedmen. Some freedmen even went on to open their own small bathhouses or become professional attendants, living a life that was a world away from the soot-filled corridors of the Hippocaust. This was a rare but not unheard of occurrence, a tiny glimmer of hope in an otherwise brutal system. Historians still argue whether the Roman bath system, with its reliance on slave labor, was an economic impossibility without it. Could they have existed on such a grand scale if they had to pay for all of the labor? The answer is likely no. The Roman bath was a testament to both Roman engineering and Roman social structure, a system built on the backs of the unfree. You're now back in the main halls, the sounds and smells of the service corridors fading behind you. The grand architecture and the joyful sounds of the bathers seem different now, tainted by the knowledge of what it took to create this spectacle. The steam is no longer just steam. It's a physical reminder of the heat and labor of the men below. The warm floor is not just warm. It's a symbol of the tireless work of the stokers. The public face of the Roman baths was one of leisure and relaxation, but the hidden reality was one of relentless, often brutal work. The baths were a microcosm of the Roman Empire itself, a place of breathtaking grandeur, built on a foundation of human suffering. You are now leaving the baths, but the images of the slaves in the Hippocaust will linger, a poignant reminder of the true cost of Roman convenience. The air outside feels different now, not just cool, but a little bit heavier with the weight of that knowledge. The world of the Roman baths was complex, and nowhere was that more apparent than in the spaces designated for women. While the grand central halls were often the domain of men, women were a crucial part of the bathhouse ecosystem. But their experience was often a separate and sometimes very different one. You are now moving toward the women's quarters, a distinct part of the complex that was either a separate wing or a dedicated time slot, usually in the morning. For a mainstream historical fact, many larger bath complexes like the baths of Caracalla had separate wings for men and women with their own changing rooms, hot rooms, and cold rooms. These women's quarters, or balni muliebres, were often smaller and less ornate than the men's sections. They served the same purpose, but on a more modest scale. The atmosphere, however, was no less lively. Just like the men's baths, the women's sections were social hubs for gossip, business, and relaxation. This is where a truly quirky or fringe tidbit comes into play. In some of the smaller, less formal bathhouses, men and women would share the same pools. While this might seem scandalous, it was a common practice, particularly in smaller towns or more casual settings. Historians still argue whether this was a true sign of social liberation or if it was simply a matter of convenience. It was a space where the strict social norms of Roman life were relaxed and men and women could interact in a way that was impossible in most other public settings. The atmosphere in the women's quarters was one of intimate camaraderie. You'd see mothers with their daughters, friends discussing their latest triumphs, and women from all walks of life sharing stories and advice. The women's sections often had their own aliptes or masseuses, who were almost always women themselves. This created a safe, comfortable space for women to relax and be themselves away from the watchful eyes of men. However, the women's sections were not without their own social hierarchies and rituals. Just like the men, the women would use olive oil and strigils to get clean. But their beauty rituals were often more elaborate. They would spend hours applying perfumes, styling their hair, and decorating their bodies. The baths were a place for women to prepare for a night out, to catch up with friends, and to simply exist in a space that was entirely their own. And let's not forget the children. The baths were a family affair, and children of all ages would often accompany their parents. The women's quarters were filled with the sounds of laughing children, a reminder that the baths were not just for adults, but for the whole family. They were a place for a Roman to be a parent, a friend, a citizen, and a physical body all at once. The separation of men and women in the baths when it happened was a reflection of Roman social values. It was a way to maintain a sense of order and propriety in a space where the usual social barriers were stripped away. But the occasional mixing of the sexes in some bathhouses also tells us something important about the Romans. They were a lot more flexible and practical than we often give them credit for. They were a people who, for all their laws and traditions, were willing to bend the rules for a good soak. You're now moving out of the women's quarters, and back into the main corridors of the baths. The air is filled with the scent of both men's and women's perfumes, a single unified scent that speaks to the shared experience of the Roman baths. You've seen the baths from the perspective of both men and women, and you have come to realize that no matter who you were, the baths were a place of profound importance, a place for social connection, and a place to simply be human. You've explored the social, physical, and even moral dimensions of the Roman baths, but there's a final, vital layer to uncover the leisure. Beyond the scrubbing and soaking the palestra and the business deals, the baths were a place for pure, unadulterated fun. This was where the Romans came to let their hair down a public space for private pleasures both high and low. As you move through a less traveled corridor, you stumble upon a small, open courtyard. Here, a different kind of game is being played. You see a group of men sitting on small benches, hunched over a board, their faces taut with concentration. They're playing Ludus Latruncalorum, a strategy board game similar to chess. This is a mainstream historical fact. Board games were a common pastime in the Roman baths. They provided a mental workout to complement the physical one, a way to pass the time and engage in a bit of friendly competition. The stakes were often low, a few small coins or a round of wine, but the rivalry was real. But the games weren't just confined to boards. The baths were a place for all kinds of gambling. Dice games, or amo aleo, were incredibly popular. You can hear the rattle of dice in a quiet corner, the sharp intake of breath, as a winner is revealed in the low groans of the losers. Gambling was officially frowned upon by the Roman authorities, but in the relaxed atmosphere of the baths it was a common and accepted vice. It was a way to add a little bit of excitement to the day, a chance to win or lose a few coins, a particularly quirky or fringe tidbit. The baths were also a place for a kind of informal betting on athletic events. Remember, the wrestling from the palestra spectators would often place small bets on the outcome of a match. It was a way to make the athletic events more engaging, and it added a layer of excitement to the already lively atmosphere. It was a kind of proto-sports betting, a public display of competitive spirit. The baths were a place for all sorts of goings-on. Prostitution, while technically illegal in most public spaces, was a common occurrence in and around the baths. It was a space where people from all walks of life mixed, and the opportunities for illicit activities were plentiful. The Roman bath was a microcosm of the city itself, a place of both high culture and low vice. Historians still argue whether the presence of prostitution in the baths was a sign of a moral decay or simply a reflection of the pragmatic nature of Roman society. Was it a sign of a society that was out of control, or was it just a matter of convenience? The answer is likely somewhere in the middle. The Romans were a people who, for all their laws and traditions, were willing to bend the rules for a good time. You're now moving out of the courtyard and back into the main halls of the baths. The air is filled with the sounds of laughter, the clatter of dice, and the occasional burst of argument. It's a rich tapestry of sound, a constant reminder that the baths were not just about getting clean, they were about living. They were a place for people to come together, to relax, to compete, and to simply be human. The baths were a place of profound importance, a place for social connection, and a place to simply be. You are now leaving this vibrant world, but the images of the people, the games, and the goings-on will linger, a poignant reminder of the true cost of Roman convenience. You've witnessed the social heart of the Roman baths, but you can't truly understand their purpose without acknowledging the powerful men who built them. The baths were not just for the people. They were a testament to the power of the emperors, a grand public relations tool on a scale that is almost unimaginable today. As you move through one of the larger, more opulent halls, you see statues and monuments dedicated to the emperors who funded these projects. This is a mainstream historical fact. Emperors like Caracalla Diocletian and Trajan built massive bath complexes to win the favor of the Roman populace. These emperors understood that a well-fed, entertained, and clean populace was a happy one. The baths were a tangible display of their generosity and their commitment to the public good. By providing a place for people to relax and socialize, they were not only improving the quality of life, but they were also creating a sense of unity and shared identity. It was a brilliant political strategy, a way to show their power and compassion in a single impressive gesture. But this was not just about winning hearts and minds. It was also about a very literal display of power. The sheer size and grandeur of these baths were a symbol of Roman engineering prowess. The domes, the arches, the intricate plumbing, and the massive hippocaust systems were a testament to the fact that the Romans could conquer not only other nations, but also the very laws of physics. It was a message to the world: Rome is the greatest city on earth, and its emperors are the most powerful men in the world. A quirky or fringe tidbit. Some emperors would occasionally make a surprise visit to the public baths, often to a less grand one, to show they were men of the people. While these visits were almost certainly staged, they were a brilliant piece of political theater. It was a way for the emperor to seem approachable and humble, even as he was surrounded by a massive security detail and a retinue of attendants. It was a public performance of humility, a subtle but effective way to connect with the populace. Historians still argue whether these visits were genuine expressions of a desire to connect with the people, or simply a cynical political ploy. The truth is likely a mix of both. An emperor's life was one of constant performance, and the baths were just another stage. The baths were also a way to control the populace. By providing a place for them to release their frustrations and their energy, the emperors were keeping the masses distracted from political unrest. It was a subtle form of social control, a way to keep the peace without resorting to brute force. The baths, like the Colosseum, were a pressure valve, a place for the masses to release their energy in a safe and controlled environment. You are now leaving this grand hall, but the image of the statues and the sense of imperial power they represent will linger in your mind. The Roman baths were more than just a place to get clean. They were a political tool, a symbol of power, and a brilliant piece of public relations. They were a testament to the fact that the Roman emperors understood something that many leaders today still do not: the power of public space and the importance of a well-designed, well-funded, and widely accessible social hub. The emperors built the baths, but it was the people who gave them life. And now you're about to see what truly made them all tick: the ingenious system that was hidden from view. You've seen the grand halls, the bustling courtyards, and the hidden labors that made the baths possible. But there is one final essential piece of the puzzle, a secret world that lay beneath your feet. To truly understand the Roman public baths, you must go beneath the marble floor into the heart of the machine. You're now in a dark, narrow corridor, a service tunnel that smells of damp stone and a faint, acrid smoke. This is the hippocaust system, the ingenious engine of the baths. For a mainstream historical fact, the hippocaust was a complex and brilliant system of central heating. It consisted of a network of raised floors and hollow walls. Hot air from a large furnace, or prefurnium, would be pumped through this system, circulating beneath the floor and up through the walls. The floors were raised on small brick pillars called pili, creating a space for the hot air to flow. This heated the floors and walls, which in turn heated the rooms above. It was a truly remarkable piece of engineering, a way to heat massive public spaces without the use of open fires. The heat from the furnace was not wasted. It also heated large water tanks, which supplied the hot water for the pools. The water would be heated in a series of 3 tanks, each one a little hotter than the last, until it was at the perfect temperature for the caldarium. It was a marvel of efficiency, a testament to the Roman understanding of thermodynamics and fluid dynamics. They had a system for everything, from the most mundane tasks to the most complex engineering projects. A quirky or fringe tidbit is that the Hippocaust system was so effective that it was even used to heat homes and villas. While not a common practice, a few wealthy Romans had Hippocausts in their private residences, a testament to the Roman love of comfort and luxury. It was a sign of extreme wealth, a way to show that you had not only a warm home, but also the wealth to maintain the massive system that heated it. Historians still argue whether the Romans invented the Hippocaust or if they borrowed it from other cultures. It's a testament to the fact that even the most well-documented aspects of Roman life can have a shadowy, undocumented past. The simple fact is that they were the ones who perfected it and used it on a massive scale. The Hippocaust was a dark and dangerous place. The air was thick with soot and carbon monoxide, and the heat was intense. The slaves who worked here had a miserable and often short life. They were the anonymous force that kept the water hot, the floors warm, and the whole system running smoothly. Their labor was essential, but it was also invisible. The bathers above would never see them, never hear them, and would likely never give them a second thought. You are now back in the main halls, the sounds and smells of the service corridors fading behind you. The grand architecture and the joyful sounds of the bathers seemed different now, tainted by the knowledge of what it took to create the spectacle. The steam is no longer just steam. It's a physical reminder of the heat and labor of the men below. The warm floor is not just warm. It's a symbol of the tireless work of the stokers. The baths were a microcosm of the Roman Empire itself, a place of breathtaking grandeur built on a foundation of human suffering. And now you're about to witness their end. You have journeyed through the vibrant, wild world of the Roman public baths, a place of sweat and splendor, of business and pleasure, of grandeur and grime. You've walked the marble floors, felt the intense heat of the Hippocaust, and experienced the shock of the frigidarium. You've seen the baths in their full glory, a testament to Roman engineering, social life, and power. But all things, even empires, must come to an end. The great Roman public baths, like the empire itself, began a slow and gradual decline. The reasons were many. For a mainstream historical fact, as the empire began to fracture and its resources were strained by military conflicts and political instability, the maintenance of these massive complexes became increasingly difficult. The aqueducts that supplied them with water fell into disrepair, and the hippocausts, which required a constant supply of wood, became too expensive to fuel. The baths, which were once a symbol of imperial power, became a financial burden. As the empire weakened, a new, more somber religion took hold. Christianity, with its emphasis on modesty and spiritual purity, viewed the public display of nudity and the social mixing of the baths with suspicion. A quirky or fringe tidbit is that some early Christian communities even held private baths, but they were a far cry from the grand public spectacles of the Roman era. The social and religious norms were shifting, and the baths, with their pagan rituals and public debauchery, no longer fit in with the new order. The final blow came with the barbarian invasions. As the Goths, Vandals, and other tribes sacked Rome, the baths were often among the first places to be plundered. The lead pipes were melted down for weapons, the marble was used for other buildings, and the hippocausts were left to rot. The baths, which had once been the beating heart of the city, became a silent, desolate ruin. Historians still argue whether the decline of the baths was a cause or a symptom of the fall of the Roman Empire. Did they fall into disuse because the empire was already in decline, or did their abandonment contribute to the social and moral decay of Rome? The truth is likely a little of both. The decline of the baths was a powerful symbol of a society in flux, a society that was losing its grip on the very things that had made it great. Now, as your journey comes to an end, you stand in the ruins of what was once a grand bathhouse. The walls are crumbling, the marble is gone, and the pools are filled with debris. The laughter, the shouts, and the splashing of water are long gone, replaced by profound and melancholy silence. The hippocaust, which once roared with heat, is now a cold, empty tomb. The statues of the emperors are broken, their faces staring blankly at the sky. The wind whispers through the empty arches, a lonely sigh for a world that has passed. It's a sad end for such a vibrant, wild place. But even in their ruin, the baths tell a story of a people who, for a brief shining moment, created a place where the high and low could meet, a place of both splendor and squalor, a place for the body and the soul. The legacy of the Roman public baths lives on not in the ruins, but in the idea of a public space, a place for all people, a place for community. And that, my friend, is a story worth remembering. Now let the last images fade from your mind. The scent of olive oil and damp stone, the echo of laughter, the ghost of warm water on your skin. They are just memories now, and with them you can let yourself go. Your journey through the ancient world is complete. The dust of Rome is finally washing away. The city is sleeping now, and so, my friend, should you. Sweet dreams.